everyone, and welcome back to my channel. If you are new here, my name is Jen, also known as BostonJen around the internet and BostonJen1 on Instagram. And today I'm here to share with you how I do my review of the past year and how I plan and set goals for the new year. And this is a process that I've been tweaking for the past couple of years, and I'll probably continue to tweak it. But a lot of you comment on my audio podcast and other things that I post on social media about how organized I am and how do I get so much done and things like that. And I think this is a lot of that framework for how I get things done and how I make sure that the things that I'm putting my time into align with who I want to be and what I want to get done for the year. So I'm really excited to share this with you. I'm an absolute organizational junkie, and so I have a lot to share on this topic. I've tried to kind of narrow it down and put together a framework for you to follow, so I hope that this is useful. If you do find this content enjoyable, I hope that you will give it a thumbs up and maybe comment down below with what you're working on or what you're thinking or any questions that you might have. One thing that you might be thinking to yourself is, Jen, we're already into January. Why are we talking about this now? But you know what? It is never too late. Let's face it, 2020 was a bit of a whirlwind. I was a little late in finishing this process for myself and tweaking it. So I've just finished mine in the last couple days, and that's perfectly fine. And if you happen to have found this video several months into the year, that's fine too. You could do a review of the past 3 or 6 months and then plan for the next 6 months or for the rest of the year or whatever makes sense to you. So don't get too caught up in those kind of details. If you're kind of a strict rule follower, I'm giving you your permission slip to do this whenever it makes sense for you. So without further ado, let's just dive right in. I have put together some slides to make this a little bit easier for you, and I'm also going to attach some worksheets down below so that if you want to print them out and use them as your guide for doing some journaling and some planning, you'll have those at your disposal. Okay, let's dive right in with reviewing the previous year. Now, the first thing that I do in this process is I go through my calendar and I go through my photos and I jot down for each month the different things that happened. And sometimes they're big things, milestones like birthdays or deaths or graduations or whatever it might be. And then sometimes they're smaller things, little moments that I want to remember, first time I did things and things along those lines. So I've given you here some things to kind of be on the lookout for, but I encourage you to make this process your own. This could be something that you could do with your family and do that together and see what they remember, or especially if you've got, say, kids with smartphones, maybe you all want to share your photos or do something like that. You can sort of put as much time and effort into this as you want or not. You might be tempted to skip it, but I will ask you not to. It's a really great process. There were so many things that I didn't remember over the course of 2020, and when I went through this process, I was ever so more happy that I did. So let me give you some examples that I've written down here. Well, obviously, experiencing my first pandemic. We've never done that before. I'm glad that I wrote that down. You think that we will always remember it, and probably we will, because that's a big deal. But there are other firsts that I had kind of forgotten about. I donated whole blood and platelets for the first time this year, so that was an exciting thing that I've been wanting to do for a while. I also paid off my car. I turned 40. We got a new backhoe and I learned to drive it. So things like that, those pictures and those things on my calendar jogged my memory. And I'm really glad to have remembered those. And then that becomes sort of an important part of the process when you're thinking about what you want to do and focus on in the next year. Step number 2 in reviewing your year. This is where you want to decide on your areas of focus and then look back at your year and ask yourself some questions about those. So what are some different areas of focus? This could be things like your health or wellness. It could be things like work or finances or self-improvement, learning, community service, or charity work that you might want to do. It could be your side hustle or your creative stuff. It could be your knitting or your crochet or your spinning or a design business or whatever that might be. But think about kind of what categories make sense for you and that are important parts of your life and really deserve your attention, that you want to put your attention into. And then I've listed for you a way that you can kind of look back at the previous year and see how you did in terms of those. For this, there's kind of two ways to do this process. You can, for each area of focus, answer all of the questions listed, or you could just answer the questions once, keeping those areas of focus in mind. I'm not going to read each of them to you, but it encourages you to think about what you're proud of, what you got results in, new experiences, what you wish you did more or less of, and things that you learned. Some of mine for 2020 were for health and wellness, new habits that I incorporated. I gave up Diet Coke, hopefully for good this time. I started working out at home, which is something I've never done regularly before. I've been making and drinking mostly hot homemade coffee at home every day this year, so that's been great. And I've been regularly donating blood. So those are new habits that I've incorporated into my life that it's good for me to remind myself of. And then in terms of creativity and fiber crafts and podcastings and things like that, under new skills and knowledge, I've learned iMovie and editing for these videos. I've learned how to spin and how to weave. So those are two huge things that I didn't know how to do before this year and would have been easy to forget if I hadn't gone through that first part of the process. Things I wish I spent less time on this year, worrying that things would be hard or out of my skill level. I shared on a recent episode of the podcast that I didn't use my beautiful spinning wheel back here for probably a good month or two because my drive band was broken. And I knew that people used simple things like cotton or hemp for their drive band. And I have a ton of kitchen cotton. And not until after all that time had passed that I just got brave enough to just tie it on there and see if it worked. And it did. So if I hadn't been afraid to try it all that time, I could have been using my reel for a lot longer. And then in terms of creative results, I increased my newsletter subscribers, my Instagram followers, and my YouTube followers. So all of those were good things to have reflected on. Okay, let's move along to step 3, which is to review any goals that you set at the beginning of the year. Now, if you didn't do this, you could obviously skip this step, but you could also think about, you probably had at least some things in mind, even if you didn't write them down. And I've listed some questions here just to prompt you to think about whether or not you kind of lived up to what you were hoping to do at the beginning of the year. My goals for 2020 were to exercise for 20 minutes or more 3 times a week with a focus on strength training, to publish 7 patterns on Ravelry, and to get 10% more sales of my designs, my knitting and crochet patterns than I had in 2019. And if you add up those 3 times a week, 7 patterns and 10%, that would equal 20 for 2020, which I liked. But this was a good chance for me to go through and look at how I did, right? So for my workouts, I did 161 workouts, which if you divide that by 52 weeks is on average 3. So I was pretty happy with that. 141 of those that I logged were strength training exercises. I tracked them on Fitbit. There's probably at least a couple of workouts I didn't put on here and definitely some hikes and things like that. But overall, I feel like I met that goal and that one feels good. I did not publish 7 patterns on Ravelry, but I did publish 6, and I have 2 that are nearly done. One I'm working with my tech editor on now, and the other one is nearly ready to go. So while that wasn't a complete win, that was fine, and it kind of ties into my next one, which I didn't meet at all, which was getting 10% more sales. And looking back at that one, this was a good chance to answer the question about what was I afraid of. And part of that was not wanting to be sort of salesy or like intending to make money during this, especially the spring and summer part of the pandemic, which is usually when I'm publishing a lot because the winter is a great time for me to write the patterns. It just wasn't feeling great to me to be putting my stuff out there. And it's been interesting to think back on, because I don't know that I would do it the same if I had it to do all over again, because I was buying patterns, I was making things, I was happy to support indie makers. So there's no reason that other people wouldn't have felt the same if I was publishing patterns. So I learned from that. Did I meet the goal? Nope. But by reviewing it, I definitely got more out of it than just looking at the list and saying, didn't do that one. So definitely encourage you to go through those questions and review whatever goals you set at the beginning of the year. And then finally, for reviewing your year, step 4, which is if you set a word for the year, a one-word intention, or a phrase that was something that you wanted to guide you for the year, to look back at that word and see how you lived it, or maybe how you didn't. And some questions are here for you to delve a little bit deeper into that. I forgot that I had set a one-word theme for my 2020, and it was flourish. And I feel really good about that word. It wasn't intentional because I clearly forgot about it, but I feel like despite the insanity that was 2020 and how the pandemic personally impacted me and the impact on the world, and it's not to belittle any of the negative, awful consequences of COVID-19, but I feel like under the circumstances, I did my best to flourish, to thrive. And that doesn't mean that everything went well or everything went perfectly. And I've definitely struggled and I've been sad and it's been hard. But also I do think that I have lived my word for the year. So it was interesting to think about the ways in which that's true. And I'm not going to belabor that. But anyways, I do encourage you to think about your word for the year. Okay, let's move on to planning your year. This is probably the part you're all here for, right? So, step 1 is to take some time to think about who you want to be this year. This part might feel a little woo and like just a little too sort of in your head, but it's a chance to hope and to dream and to give your brain a little bit of freedom to just think about what could be this year. And it's also a great way for you to document what your best self is deciding and saying that you want now, so that if and when things get tough, or you're having a bad day or a bad week or a bad month, you can look back at this and maybe sort of get yourself back on track, or at least, sort of hone in on something that you think that you could tweak. So again, I'm not going to read all of these different questions, but I do encourage you to answer as many of them as you think you can. And I did this for 2020, so I reflected on these this year also, and it was fascinating to see what I wrote down at the beginning of the year and to see where I landed at the end of the year. So I think that it's just a great framework to get you thinking about what's important to you. Okay, let's move on to step 2 in planning. Now that you've thought about who you want to be and what's important to you and themes for your year, I am going to encourage you to create a one-word theme or a phrase to guide you through this year. There are tons of different folks who do projects like this. I know Gretchen Rubin talks about this on the Happier podcast, and Allie Edwards has a whole sort of memory keeping themed class about this. There's lots of places that you can look for inspiration for words. And I encourage you to look through and maybe don't settle on the very first one, but let it marinate a little bit and think about it, and try to aim for something positive, something that will inspire you to go on and to refocus when things get tricky, right? So my word for 2020 is delight. And I was listening to a podcast. This is how this word sort of came to me. I had a couple others in mind, but they weren't feeling 100% right. And then I was hearing a podcast and someone was talking about going for a walk and seeing some fairy lights and how it just absolutely delighted her and just changed her whole mood, and how she was wanting to create a fairy garden in her yard in order to sort of gift that sense of delight to other people walking by. It was the Forever 35 podcast, if you're familiar with that. It's a great girl gab kind of podcast. Anyways, hearing that story for some reason just lit something up in me, and I knew that that was the right word for me. I've chosen words in other years that are a bit more focused on sort of building and direction and focus and things like that. And I think there is a time and a place for those words. And one of those words might resonate with you this year. I feel like where I am in my journey, I have a lot of habits and things already in place that I'm confident that other things that I'm focused on will get done or have a decent chance of getting done. And I can get sort of too type A and focused and rigid, and looking for delight in every day, being someone who brings delightfulness to other people is something that I want to incorporate in this year in order to make sure that I'm balancing myself out, and also hopefully to take advantage of the delights that will come in 2021 that we weren't able to partake in 2020. I am going to delight in hugging almost everyone I know and love many, many, many times, right? So there's going to be a lot of things like that, and I want to be focused on really enjoying those delights when they come my way. So that is my word for this year. Step number 3, choose your goals. I have a whole nother YouTube video on this that was done in 2020 before we knew what 2020 was going to look like, about setting goals. And it's a long course that I gave in person, and I would like to redo that at some point. But all that to say, if you want a deeper dive on this part of things, definitely go over and check that out for now, or ask me questions below. But I really recommend that you set maybe 1 to 3 goals max for the year. Now you could do 1 to 3 personal and 1 to 3 business if you really want to, but setting just a few goals doesn't mean those are the only things you can and will achieve during the course of the year. You get to set the time frame. So if it takes you 3 months to get to all of your goals that you set, great, set some more. You're clearly very good at this and you can keep going. So don't be sort of too limited by that number. Start where you are. If you have 100 pounds to lose and you haven't exercised in forever, don't set a goal of running a marathon this year. That's not kind to yourself, right? Similarly, if you want to be a writer and you're not doing any writing right now, having a book proposal by the end of the year may be a little bit too much. Maybe you want to start a little bit smaller, meet yourself where you are, make it measurable. So something that can be tracked. Writing more, how do you know if you achieved that goal? If it was to write for 10 minutes every day, or to write 100 words every day, or 1,000 words every day, that is something that you could look back, every week, every month, every quarter, every year to see if you've achieved it. And then know your compelling reason why. If you don't really want to do something, maybe you just think you should, you're going to be less likely to complete that goal. It might be something that maybe you should do, but if you're not really compelled to do it, it might not be the goal for you. So let me share a little bit about my 3 goals for 2021. They are to continue with my goal from last year of 3 workouts per week. I think that's pretty achievable. I thought about upping it a little bit, but realistically, I have some underlying health stuff. There are going to be days or weeks where I just can't exercise, and I feel like this is a great goal. If I surpass it, wonderful. I'll be so happy with that. But I think that 3 per week is a good, healthy goal for me. I want to publish 8 designs this year, and I want to make and assess my goals every month in 2021. So these are specific, measurable, and achievable based on what I've been able to do in the past several years. Notice I didn't go from 3 workouts a week to 7 workouts a week. That's not achievable for me. It might be for you. And then I looked at sort of my why. So my why for my 3 strength workouts a week, I want to be toned, I want to be strong, but also mostly I just know that I feel best when I am moving my body that regularly, if not more. I don't feel well if I don't move. So that's an important thing to me, and that will help motivate me to do it on days when I don't want to, which PS is a lot of days. Okay, and then the timeline for all of these is 1 year. And I think you can tell from looking at this, it's going to be pretty easy to measure each of these. All right, and last but not least, step 4, get clear on how to achieve those goals by really making it tangible. So you can see from the questions here that I'm gonna ask you what you can do to make progress on these goals on a regular basis. I really encourage you to try to tie these things that you want to do with habits you already have. So if you set up your coffee pot every night to get your coffee ready in the morning, maybe you'll also put your workout clothes with it if you are gonna wanna work out in the morning. So just pair it to something that you already have, build it along with the habits of your life, and you'll be much more likely to do it. There are also other ideas for making things easier, so you can schedule it, get an accountability partner, just make it convenient, like putting out your clothes or putting on your clothes in the morning. Your workout clothes, if they're already on, you're far more likely to work out than if you actually have to change. It seems like a small thing, but it definitely works. And then how can you sort of write down those goals and make them visible and find ways to check in on your progress? So there are tons of different ways to track your progress. For my fitness goal, I plan to continue to track in my Fitbit app. It's convenient. It's always on. It's on both of my phones, so it's very easy to access. It's quick. And then I can go online and pull up all of my activity, copy and paste it into a spreadsheet, and really easily see where I'm at. If I had to write that down in a book and the book wasn't handy to me, if I was at work, say in the future versus at home, that might not be a great option. So that is convenient, and it's an easy way for me to track that. And in terms of making things more visible to me, I think I'm going to do a whole nother video on this because I think I could dive into this for a long time. But basically what I've set up is I use Evernote to keep all of my tasks and things that I want to work on personally. And so I've set up notes for my 2021 goals, my Q1 goals, and my January goals. And then each week I have a note for the things that I want to get done that week. And I'm drawing some of those to-dos from the things that I want to get done in that month, in that quarter. Now, because I am mostly at home with this pandemic situation still ongoing, I am using a paper notebook to keep a list of what I want to get done during that day, because having that paper in my face is frankly seeming to help. So we'll see how that goes. Again, this is something that I tweak all the time, but this basic setup is usually what works for me. And that's how I'm going to track my progress. But I encourage you to go with what works for you. If you are a paper person, don't set up some elaborate online system. That's not going to be for you. And vice versa, if that's true. So that is a lot of information, but I do hope that this has been helpful. Like I said at the beginning, a lot of you comment that I get a lot done over the course of a day or in between podcast episodes. And that's because I do make plans and I prioritize them. And then the more I do, the more I am satisfied with myself and what I'm getting done, because I promised myself I was going to do this thing and then I did it. And that momentum helps build. But without having sort of those priorities visible to me, it can be very easy to spend 15 minutes, 30 minutes, an hour on social media. Or I could spend that same amount of time doing one more round of edits on a pattern, or even just knitting or spinning or doing something else. And at the end of the year, I will have been happy to have done those things, and I'm not going to have missed that little bit of time on social media. But without knowing what I want for the year and having those things visible to me, I wouldn't get done what I get done. So I definitely encourage you to try it if this all feels a lot. Pick and choose what parts feel right for you, and I would love to hear how it goes. If you have any questions, please do feel free to leave them down below. I will come back on here and maybe do some follow-up videos, especially if there's themes of things or if there's more that you would like to see about my systems. I would be happy to share those with you. So just let me know what you'd like to see more of, and I'll be happy to share that with you in future videos. And I would love to hear from you. What were your biggest takeaways from 2020? What did you learn? What were the best parts? What were the worst parts? And what are you thinking for 2021? Are you gonna pick a word of the year? Have you set your goals already? Are there things that you'd like to share with me? I would love to hear about it. So definitely comment down below with any of those things. As I said at the beginning, I have worksheets for both parts of this process that will be linked. So feel free to download those, print them out, or just look at them on your computer and write down your answers to the questions. And I encourage you, don't just listen to this. Do the work and get going. And we already sort of feel like 2021 is going to be a better year. And I feel like this is a surefire way to make sure that it's at least a decent bit better than 2020, personally, if nothing else. So thank you again for watching. Again, if you're watching this in the middle of the year, go ahead and just start it now or queue it up with a reminder to watch at the end of the year. And if you thought this was helpful, I would love it if you would share this video with a friend who might find it helpful too. Thank you so much for watching, and I hope your 2021 is off to a great start. Talk to you soon. Bye-bye.